Ooh, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, here for another weekly Q&A. And, oh boy, I got a question in. And, of course, you can email. That seems to be the most popular way for people to get in touch with me, even though I'm available on YouTube. But, you know, who knows what people want to say in YouTube comments and so on. Anyway, and Spotify and all over the place. But I did get email seems to be the most popular, and that's at fu@xxtech.net. So to get into, all right, I'm going to save that one for after. It's a question that is shockingly, like, I am actually so stunned at the synchronicity once again that came around this question, just like I was last week. And well, we'll get into it. So we've got some like occult, Kabbalah, spiritual stuff to get into, which I know everybody gets super, super excited about, you know, and might be the only thing they actually want me to talk about. But then, you know, something fun, tech related, you know, to open up, even though, like, again, I always say tech is what, you know, gave me my claim to quasi fame. I don't know. But everybody seemed to have stuck around for all of the, shall we say, spiritual technology instead of the, you know, electronics, and all of that. And I'm going to try, though the second question could turn into a massive deep dive if I let it. I'm going to try and keep this on the shorter side, because the first couple Q&As I've done since, you know, back on this train, have been like 2 hours. Because I start like weaving into other subjects and talking about whatever else, but that's not going to happen here, or at least I hope not. And we'll stick to the good stuff. As far as, once again, people have asked about live Q&As. Yes, those are coming. You know, want to make sure that I want to get all the logistics worked out around that, but I think that those are going to be absolutely dynamite. If you have, like, let me know. So here's a funny thing quick on that with live Q&As. Okay. Part of what to work out is the time within which to do them. Okay. Actually, during the day, okay, like afternoon Eastern time is, or even morning Eastern time is actually like the best time for me to do these sorts of things. At night and weekends, not the best time for me to do these sorts of things. I used to do them at like 6 p.m. Eastern. That was sort of a standard, usually on a weekday of some kind. But let me know, you got the email address. Let me know, you know, kind of like where you like these sorts of things. Cause I notice that, especially on YouTube, a lot of the YouTubers that, I'm a fan of, who are like, shall we say, a little more, more rational and reasonable, even though I don't consider myself very rational, but a little more rational and reasonable, a little more on the educational side, or maybe a lot more on the educational side, which is where I think YouTube still shines. Everything else is garbage. No, that's not true, but you get my point. I notice a lot of them do it like in the middle of the day. Like they'll do it at like 1, 2 p.m. Eastern or something like that, which is great for me if that's what works for everybody else. Maybe that's not the best time for them, but like me, that's the only time that they can get it in. Let me know if you have thoughts on that, you know, however you get in touch with me. But again, the email is always there, fu@xxtech.net. So, okay, enough of that. No more preamble. Okay, let's get into the tech question. This is just a little fun one. It's not something that necessarily has to take a lot of time. And then we'll get into what I think others would consider to actually be the fun one. Okay, so we have, okay, Rabbi SOVRYN, I'm making my wish list. Pixel phone, in parentheses, they put maybe Pixel Watch, Meta Quest 3. All right, let me keep reading. But the one thing no one's asked you yet is what PC to get. With all this crazy AI stuff happening, I'm finally thinking about getting away from my privacy beast. I don't know if that's true. I said I'd read through it all. I don't know if that's a reason to get rid of your privacy. Please don't do that. But anyway, we'll keep going. What kind of computer or laptop do you think is the sweet spot to get right now to really take advantage of the new AI tools and features coming out? And I guess I might as well game while I'm at it. P.S. Also, what headphones? All right, look, don't follow my wish list, or don't, just because I have it doesn't mean that it's what works for you. Okay. Like this is really, really key. Because what I do, I mean, I don't feel that I use any of my varying devices in really conventional ways. Okay. Like I use software often that is incredibly antiquated. I'm very much, when it comes to computers, especially, I'm very much a creature of habit. Okay. And look, for some people, an iPhone is just like, it ticks the boxes. Okay. I mean, pretty much any phone is screwed. Arguably any computer is screwed. Actually, your privacy beast is about as close to not screwed as possible, I suppose. That's why I'm saying don't get rid of it. But, it's all screwed, right? Okay. You have some best practices you can engage in from like a personal cybersecurity standpoint. But beyond that, like all these devices again are in many ways just flat out screwed. So, okay, let's get into your question. Okay. But I just want to make that super clear. Just because it's what I have doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best. Okay. Because your needs could be wildly different. There could be that one thing that you need, that just changes everything. Okay. Like if you're really knee deep in iMessage, for example, right? Like, I mean, we're not even talking, I know you're asking me about computers. Okay. But like if you're knee deep in iMessage, I think like the coolest thing for iMessage that existed is getting shut down by Intel. Intel had if you had a Windows computer if you had a Windows computer and you had a iPhone, like syncing your iMessages, your text messages and even your pictures was not always the easiest thing over the past few years. Now, I mean, like Microsoft has their phone link, right? But Intel actually had a better option than that worked really, really well as long as you were using the right Intel processor. They are now shutting that service down. And I'm glad I'm not using iPhone anymore because, man, like I relied on that. I'm also not primarily using a Wintel machine, right? Like a Windows plus Intel machine. So it wasn't really viable to me anyway. So I'm not feeling the heat from that. But that's my point, is that there might be these little kinds of software that make your little device ecosystem, okay, or what I call your PAN, right? Your personal area network, that makes it really work for you. Okay. So this is always a really tough thing to say. That said, to get to the point about asking, what computer should I get? Let me tell you the most important thing. All right. I'll give you some recommendations. Yes. But the most important thing is I don't care what website you pick because I've looked at them all of them, at least the very major tech news outlets, okay, and outlets that do reviews, most of the YouTube quote unquote influencers, okay, that do reviews of tech and all this, unless they're talking about Apple, in which case, like it's a far more simpler thing. Like, okay, well, what form factor do you want? Basically that becomes the question. How much RAM do you want? Things like this. Okay. It's not so much about, what about build quality? What about all this, blah, 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 what's the latest? And like in the PC space in general, none of these websites that are supposed to be telling you these are the best laptops of 2025 or anything like that, none of these websites are giving you the straight shoot on that. I absolutely would not listen to their recommendations. Not for a fucking second. There is almost no nuance in what they're talking about. And they're basically only recommending what is going to, effectively push affiliate sales for them, right? Like they have an affiliate link to Amazon to sell you one specific laptop that fits at a price point that they think you'll pull the trigger on. And that's what they're going to recommend. The problem that happens within this, besides the perverse incentives of affiliate links, which is a whole other subject, absolutely real, I've said this so many times over the years. Things don't have to be AI generated or psyops, if you want to use a saucy term like that, which that term should almost never be used. It's fucking stupid. The people who use that have no idea what that means. Okay. Or, you know, if you feel better with the term CIA, you know, creations, government lies, like none of that shit has to exist. None of that has to be proven to be so to know that what's online, what's on the internet is bullshit, is 99% bullshit. Affiliate marketing alone that news outlets, rely upon as a funding source. Okay. Whether it's to Amazon or take your pick, or, you know, they're going through, platforms like AWIN or whatever it happens to be. I mean, I know this industry intimately. It's all lies, because it doesn't matter if you have the best product. If you can't be backlinked to Amazon and the news outlet can't get a cut of that sale, you are not getting featured in that story. It doesn't matter if you have the lowest cost and somehow the absolute best fucking widget of whatever it is that you're looking for. It does not matter. If they can't make money off of you, you don't get fucking listed. And this is just as true in TV. Don't think that this is just a product of the internet. TV was the same fucking way. Okay. You don't need all of the conspiracy shit and whatever else, floating above your head and out there and whatever, to know that what you are being told online is by and large lies. Affiliate marketing is enough to know that you're not getting the best. And it's not even necessarily malicious. Like, you understand the incentives. They're perverse, but you understand them. Okay. So, like, as much as I want to say to you, yeah, what I recommend doesn't really matter, at the same time, no, I'm boots on the ground, proverbially. And I have no perverse incentives. I mean, I have I have lots of perviness. I mean, I am so perverse, obviously. Just go to miri.xxtech.net to know that. Again, miri.xxtech.net. Woo! I am incredibly perverse, but I don't have the perverse incentives. Okay. I'm not here to make money. In fact, and what, you don't believe me? Go. You can go back and listen to the first episode of Sovereign Tech. And I'll tell you right from there, and I would say it going forward, that I only put clean links in the show notes because I want you to know that I am not selling you something. Okay. In that regard. I mean, yeah, I run ads, but they're ads. They're ads. But like, what I recommend to you in the middle of an episode or something like that, I'm fucking recommending to you because I believe in it and because I want to provide value to you, not even to the company that makes the shit. Okay. And certainly not to the platforms that sell it. You can go all the way back to the beginning, over 10 years ago. And I was saying that. No email mark, none of that crap. I'm not interested. Okay. Yeah. I like getting in people's inbox, but and I like it when you're in mine. but I'm not it's not marketing in that sense. So anyway, let's get to the answer, shall we? Okay, let me go over it again. Okay, Rabbi Sovereign, I'm making my wish list: Pixel phone, maybe Pixel Watch. Boy, though, that March update for Pixel Watch, not great. Not great. I got to tell you, I'm sure they'll fix it in June, but they even had to push an update in April, which they normally don't do. A month-to-month update on the Pixel Watch. They do on the phones, and those are great, but yeah, Pixel Watch. Okay, MetaQuest 3. Okay, this is another one where, look, just understand, I don't have a MetaQuest because I like Meta's ecosystem. I have it because I think it's like the lowest barrier to entry, and I didn't pay a dime for it, but it's the lowest barrier to entry, okay, to PC VR gaming, and PC VR experiences. I mean, I do like apps, like Skybox and Big Screen, whatever, that, that allow me to watch movies with it. Like, that's pretty cool for sure. Okay. And also, like, I have, like prescription lenses for the MetaQuest 3, which that's nice. But really, like, the way that actually the MetaQuest connects to a PC is incredibly kludgy. It's getting better, but it's far from quote unquote there, as we say. All right. So, I really only recommend a MetaQuest 3. Again, if you do need that really low barrier to entry, Or if for some reason you really do like Meta's, metaverse ecosystem, I guess we'll say. But I don't think there's that much there. I think it's fucking creepy. I mean, if you want to ask me about that, ask me about it and I'll talk about it. I don't want to get sidetracked here on that. But like the shit that happens in, Meta's little universe is there's shit that's just off and dead about that. And I don't think the Apple Vision Pro is any better. So screw that shit. Anyway, I I just wanted to play TIE Fighter Total Conversion in VR. Okay. That's all. Everything is about TIE Fighter. Do you understand? It's my life. Since I was 13, I was born into this. You understand? Anyway. Okay. So the PC, let's talk about it. In fact, actually bringing up TIE Fighter might be valid to this. So reading on, all right, MetaQuest 3, but the one thing no one's asked you yet is what PC to get. With all this crazy AI stuff happening, I'm finally thinking about getting away from my privacy beast. What computer or laptop do you think is a sweet spot for AI tools? I might also get into gaming, and then what about headphones there? Okay. So AI PCs, right? This is not a dream that has come true, okay? I have a Copilot PC, Copilot Plus PC, right? And there's so much horseshit around this because here's the thing. So my understanding is, I've not used one, but my understanding is from a few reviewers that I actually trust, is that Windows on ARM PCs, okay, that are using Snapdragon chips, are very good for what they do. There are issues with compatibility with some specific sets of software. So I cannot use those because I use some really ancient software that nobody is ever going to update. And I don't even think the emulation layer is going to pay any attention to them that Microsoft's developing, right? This is just not good. Okay. So I have to use an Intel or AMD system. Okay. Now I'm guessing because you're asking me this question and that you have a privacy beast, you're not looking to get into Apple's ecosystem. Okay. If you were, the answers to your own questions, right? How expensive of the latest model can I afford? All right. Now that's often that's not a bad way to look at the PC space as well, but that's easily the way you look at, Apple's space because it's so slim. And I don't say that derogatorily. Okay. So, your budget, and you really should have told me your budget. Okay. I emailed you back asking that, but you haven't gotten back to me, but I want to get to this question and I'll get into the budgetary thing. Okay. But here's the point is you're looking at AI, that's clear. And you're thinking about gaming. Both of those 2 points in my mind, default you instantly to AMD, to anything that AMD is doing. Okay. They have the highest amount of TOPS, as far as NPUs go, neural processing units. They have the highest amount of TOPS on die. Okay. So you want, AMD is like a winner just in that. Intel is a fucking dumpster fire right now as a company writ large. Don't go anywhere near them. My prediction is that 10 years from now, we're basically going to be saying that the last great processor Intel made was their 12th gen. All right. And we're already in their 14th and, whatever else they're doing with Core 2 something, whatever their AI nomenclature is now, their 200 series and all this. I don't mind this. I have no problem with the fact that Intel is flailing. I have basically, I've been an Intel alternative. How about this? I've been an Intel alternative boy most of my life. Okay. I used to have a Cyrix. The instant that AMD, even when Cyrix died, that was when I was an Apple fanboy. So I was rocking PowerPC. Okay. In fact, my first, not just with Apple, but my first run-ins with Linux were largely using Fedora on PowerPC. And I learned Fedora because that's what was available for PowerPC specifically. Okay. Great shit happening with Fedora these days too, folks. Check it out. Version, where do we up to? 42 or 43? Anyway. I get lost in the betas. But KDE becoming an addition instead of a spin, fucking hot. Okay. Anyway, like when AMD finally came out with their Athlon 64 line and we finally got real 64-bit consumer processors, like I jumped on that chip so fast, so hard. Oh man. Like I was there, baby. And so not that I haven't used Intel processors since then, I have. And not to say that Intel's processors for a little while, were bad. Like they were actually very good in a lot of their offerings. Like I said, their 12th gen, solid, fucking solid. 11th gen, solid. I mean, really. In fact, my Fedora machine right now is a 12th gen Intel. So, nothing wrong with those, but things start to fall apart. Like when you get closer to Raptor Lake and everything else going on, with that and the way that memory's handled on their latest, particularly their processors with NPUs built in, like it all just gets the way it handles the RAM, just very odd. I don't recommend it. Okay. So I would recommend staying away from Intel. How about that? Okay. So you're looking at AMD. Now this is where we get into, kind of pricing. Like, are you just doing a little bit of gaming? Admittedly, AMD's like Zen 5 architecture, okay, like they're, what they're doing with like their 300 series and so on is really exciting shit. Like their APU technology, which I've spoken positively of for as long as Sovereign Tech has existed. In fact, probably more Sovereign Tech was done on an AMD ThinkPad than maybe any other computer. Okay. But again, things have changed, right? Because I would completely understand why at the time, a lot of people would argue actually Intel's the better processor, especially if you want to do gaming. I hear you. But like the APU was such an exciting idea at the time in the computing space. And now it's really come to fruition. Okay. So getting into AMD's like Ryzen AI processors is where I would go. And honestly, the integrated graphics on that is going to do really well for you. I don't know what games you want to play, but I mean, if you're looking at, I don't know, whatever, first person shooter like Call of Duty or something, like you could get a $600 computer that doesn't even have a dedicated graphics card, but that is an, AMD, again, Ryzen AI processor, 300 series specifically. Okay. Don't go with the 200, get the 300 series. You're going to kick some ass. Like it will game. And I'm very impressed by that. Okay. And you will also have at least within the Windows space, you're going to have the MPU power to technically be a Copilot Plus PC. Now we want to talk about that a little bit. Okay. And this may be like, here's the funny thing, because this is the next question you have to ask yourself. Okay. We're going to go back to like higher, if your budget is a little bit more than $600, like if you get into the 1,000 plus or the 1,200 plus, okay, dollars, kind of budget, that changes the picture a bit. So it becomes a question of what do you want to do as far as AI? Okay. Like if you're wanting to run local models and, do all of that kind of stuff, honestly, you're going to want, in my opinion, you want a good solid, at least like a 4060 at bare minimum. You're going to want a 4060, an RTX 4060 NVIDIA card. Okay. To run local models and to do that sort of thing. Okay. Now desktop NPUs as in built into the processor, that is still like a really new thing and kind of good luck getting your hands on that. Okay. So if you're looking to do only local models, you're not interested in the Copilot Plus aspect of things for Windows, then yeah, you can do that in a desktop and put the bulk of your money into a really, really great, honestly, NVIDIA card. Okay. And NVIDIA has just some awesome software like Chat with RTX, and some other things that they're doing where they're giving, they're powering not their consumer side of things, but they're powering like so much of the AI processing going on around the world. They're the masters of that software, and if you're running Ollama like that, that's another thing too. And that's fine. But a lot of this stuff really gets keyed when you're getting into local models that are not like, again, not the Copilot stuff from, from Microsoft. And obviously, unless you're in Apple space, you're not dealing with Apple Intelligence. Okay. All that's being done by NVIDIA and by, things like Ollama and other open source or, other open models. It gets a little squishy when you start to call things open source and AI sometimes. So I want to be careful with that. Okay. So, go with the desktop. I'd still rock the AMD processor, and then, but the important thing would become the NVIDIA graphics card at that point. Okay. 32 gig minimum, in my opinion, 32 gig minimum of RAM and whatever the hell you're doing. 64 is going to future-proof you for a good while. 32 is going to future-proof you for at least 5 years or more. Okay. like you'll do just fine with that. And I want to have a little bit of a conversation around that. But you'll do just fine with that. But if you can do 64, then it's something that's a little more longer term. If you can do more than that, I mean, hey, fucking dynamite, man. Okay. The more RAM you have, the more future-proofed you are, bottom line. Okay. So now if you are more interested, and this is going to get into a little bit of a separate conversation. If you are more interested in actually like Windows features with Copilot Plus PCs, then I think you're best suited to be talking about laptops, at least at this stage, unless you're willing to be patient for a little while. Because really there's no reason that all the Copilot Plus features that Copilot Plus PCs have, okay, all of those features, there's no reason that a video card couldn't handle those. You don't really need, because video cards have what are, actually blow NPUs out of the water. Okay. So there's no real need for NPUs if you have like a full-on gaming PC at some point, or, to some degree. I mean, even older RTX cards would blow most NPU specs out of the water. Okay. NPUs are about efficiency, not necessarily about power. So it's kind of a bullshit thing. Okay. And the other thing I want to say, like, look, if you're just going Linux, then just listen to everything I said about AMD and I don't know, running AI, like, see, to me, this is a good side subject to get into fast. To me, using Linux is to get away from fucking AI workloads. Like, it's to get away from all of the latest. Using Linux in my mind is more about gaining, privacy, old school computing, user-focused computing, where your computer, what it does is only what you fucking tell it to do, which is how a computer should work. But in our AI landscape, as you put it, did you say AI landscape? Maybe that was a separate email that I was thinking of. Anyway, whatever. In our AI landscape, I mean, Linux is at the core of a lot of this for sure. Okay. But like you're getting into way more complex. And the reason I'm guessing you're not doing that, even though you're using a privacy beast, I'm just kind of guessing that like you are looking to get into, especially with gaming. I know, massive strides have been done in gaming, especially with the Steam Deck, to where so many games, run on the Proton layer and, in Linux, and that's freaking dynamite, man. Like, so cool. Okay. But that's how I think of Linux. Okay. Like if you're actually looking to get into like some hardcore AI workloads and whatever, then, maybe looking at Windows, or Mac, like that's kind of the, the way to go there. Not to say you can't do it in Linux. Of course you can. It's just like a lot of the easier implementations to get started, aren't exactly there. Okay. So there's a side subject on Linux. So we're probably talking about Windows here. So let's keep going. Okay. And Copilot Plus PCs. Yes, it is clear Microsoft is seeing this as the future. However, like I said earlier, you have Windows on ARM, which for about a year have gotten way more features, and some would say pointless features, but way more features than AMD/Intel based Copilot Plus PCs. These are two separate, tracks or SKUs, I guess we could say, of Windows 11. Okay. And you have to pay attention to that. In fact, it wasn't originally. So when the PC or the laptop that I have, again, it's a Copilot Plus PC. It's AMD based. And, when I got this, there was the expectation, I want to say this was in October, November, but all of the manufacturers, this is an ASUS, but MSI, ASUS, everybody was saying Copilot Plus features are coming end of November in a later Windows update, even though they were selling them as Copilot Plus PCs. Those features did not come at the end of November. In fact, they didn't come until the beginning of April 2025. Months later. Even though Windows on ARM, ARM-based Copilot Plus PCs already had all of those features. Like the generative, like the picture generation features, lots of these little things. Not like recall and all that, but there's still some disparity. Like AI search, which actually looks really handy. Like, yeah, your privacy's thrown out the door. Okay, no shit, you're on Windows. All right, but there's no illusions here, folks. But like that looks like a really handy feature. That is not yet. It's already on Windows on ARM, but it's not yet on Copilot Plus PCs that are AMD and Intel based. Okay, so it seems like at least right now, nobody, and I mean nobody, knows what the fuck the exclusivity deal is that Windows made with ARM to give Snapdragon-based Copilot Plus PCs, specific features. Nobody knows what the hell that deal is or how long those exclusivities are supposed to exist. But that's clearly what's going on here, because again, there's ultimately no reason for there to not be feature parity between the two different types of Copilot Plus PCs. But there is. So that said, though, if you're looking to future-proof your PC, do some gaming or whatever, having a Copilot Plus PC is a great idea. Because we know that there are going to be AI features. Yes, NVIDIA's, schlepping some out, but Microsoft is probably looking at doing it, or we know they're looking at doing it on the Windows level, on improving games through AI. With varying results, but they could get better. And the Quake 2 thing, don't even get me started on that. Okay, that's not as bad as some people will lay that whole scenario out to be. So I think having, a laptop with NPUs is a great idea. And again, like I said, so here's our checklist so far of what I recommend. Okay, you want an AMD, Ryzen AI. You want it to be at least the 300 series. Okay, they have like the 300 Pro and whatever else coming out like later this year. But as long as you're in that 300 series, you're getting that Zen 5 architecture, you're fine. And then look at your RAM. Okay, have at least 32 gigabytes of RAM. RAM gets, let's finish going down the checklist. I would recommend having a dedicated graphics card. Okay, you want it to be, I do recommend NVIDIA, not anything against AMD's graphics cards. Okay, I'm just saying there's better like software particularly when it comes to AI with NVIDIA. So at least a 4060, I would say 4070 actually. And then, kind of anything up above that is gravy. So I'd really go with the 4070. So that's our checklist. As far as like screen technologies go, 1080p, I always tell you, like 1080p is great. Anything more than that is like, okay, it never justifies the price, in my opinion. To go up into like, whatever 4K screens and, 165 hertz refresh rates or even like whatever they go up to now, 240 something. I don't know, whatever they, I know what they do, but you get my point. Okay. Is that those numbers kind of don't matter. A screen is always something you can add on later to a laptop. That's not always true for RAM, right? Because RAM is commonly being soldered onto, or soldered into laptops to where it's not user replaceable. That's unfortunate. But it is becoming incredibly common. Okay. As far as size, that's totally up to you. If you want a 14-inch, 15, 16, 18, whatever, like that's totally up to you. The comment I was going to make about TIE Fighter. So I usually hate, the number pad on the right-hand side. Like I just don't like it. It feels like, completely unnecessary for the bulk of what I do. Now, if you're into certain fields, for your work, okay, those things can be, indispensable. And I understand that. So I want to respect that. Okay. But one thing that I had kind of strangely forgotten is just how useful the number pad is in a lot of old school flight simulator games, including TIE Fighter. And so, the computer I ended up getting recently actually does have the number pad. And I'm like, oh, this sucks. Like, I don't want this number pad. Get my speakers on each side of the keyboard, give me better sound. I don't need that number pad. But then I realized that I was like, oh shit, actually, I'm glad that I have the number pad. So you may want that. That's just one of those. See, this is one of those little things that 99%, I think, of your YouTube influencers or even people on Reddit or whatever, like, you'll never hear them mention that, right? Because they just don't have the same scope, and they're just like, they won't talk about, like, why might you want the number pad? If you're doing a lot of old school shooters, well, maybe shooters, but particularly a lot of older games, older DOS games and whatever, or older, like Win95, Win98 games, they actually would take advantage of the number pad because they expected every single fucking keyboard to have one. Might not always be like something you desperately need, but it's very much a nice to have. So, and you can always add an external keyboard to a laptop. So keep that in mind as well. Don't let that stop you, but that's a little something to consider, if you're thinking about gaming. Okay. So there's kind of your checklist on that. Okay. Ports. I like to have lots of ports. I would personally look for something that has at least one USB 4 port. If you're going AMD, don't get Thunderbolt. Okay. If you are looking for get Thunderbolt 5 or something, like, great. Okay. If you're going Intel, but I recommend absolutely having USB 4 port for future proofing. You can do so much with that shit. Okay. Now, Wi-Fi. Most AMD laptops sold today only have Wi-Fi 6E. And we say only, like, oh, that's so goddamn slow. No, it's not. All right. But the one thing, while we might not be able to upgrade RAM anymore, one of the things we can still upgrade on pretty much any laptop I've ever seen, even like really low-end eMMC memory ones, is you can replace the Wi-Fi card. So when AMD compatible Wi-Fi 7 cards become more of a thing, that's a $40 upgrade. So don't go too crazy thinking, oh, I don't have the latest and greatest. I don't have Wi-Fi 7. I do want you to get the latest and greatest. Okay. But don't worry about the Wi-Fi 7 part. That's something that you can upgrade later on. All right. And part of the reason you don't see it on a lot of AMD laptops or AMD based laptops is because there is like a compatibility issue with like the killer Wi-Fi 7, spec from Intel and so on. And anyway, that'll eventually get worked out. So as far as what models to get, so here's where things actually get kind of easy, because you're telling me AI, you're telling me gaming. So what you're actually looking for is a Copilot Plus gaming PC. Now, to really be able to do both efficaciously, again, you need that AMD processor and you need a designated graphics card or dedicated graphics card, again, an NVIDIA, like a 4070 or something, along those lines. Okay. This is where, you're going to spend more than $1,200. Okay. Now, if you do have, let's say you don't have the dedicated graphics card, but you have a USB 4 port on it, you could later on, get an eGPU, right, which is an external GPU connected through USB 4. And, then you could get a really expensive, huge, NVIDIA card, put it in an enclosure and connect it to your laptop that way. But then also you're going to have to connect it to, like, that won't, port through your laptop screen. You're going to have to run that to, an external monitor, usually, unless there's been a change in the spec that I'm not aware of. It's been a while since I've messed with an eGPU, admittedly, but that's also an option for you. Okay. So, but what you're really looking for, again, probably going to be over $1,200 to do this, but you want a gaming PC that is also a Copilot Plus PC. The fortunate thing for you is that those are very rare. For some fucking reason, those are not common whatsoever. Not only are they not common, when you asked me this question and I was looking into it a little bit, I'm like, oh, what models can I recommend to them? When I was looking around a little bit, there's less now than there were 6 months ago. It should be the opposite, right? If Copilot Plus is the new hotness with Microsoft and with Windows, okay, you would think that gaming PCs that are also Copilot Plus would have increased in number. That has not occurred. There are less. It is fucking weird. And does that mean that Copilot Plus in general has failed as a category? You might be onto something with that. You might be right. But do you want to take that chance? And is it still like, beneficial to have the extra NPUs and everything on, on a laptop or on your, on your PC in general? I would say yes. Are all these AI features about wiping out privacy? Yeah, to some degree, sure. So, keep that in mind, and you own a privacy beast. So again, like I said, stick with that, please. No, but if you're not wanting to, well, here we are. But if you stick to everything I laid out, like you're basically only going to have like 3 or 4 laptops at best. And even that, I don't believe, to choose from. And so then it really becomes a question of, what ecosystem do you want to start to get into? I mean, with Windows, you're already in Microsoft's ecosystem, but then it's like, you got to understand, especially when it comes to like gaming. Again, I don't know how hardcore gaming you wanted to get into. Okay. But like with gaming, like every company basically that just makes PC peripherals and not PCs themselves. Like they all have their own like software now. And it's annoying as hell to be able to control the features on, say, a mouse or even on headphones, which I know you have a headphone question. We're 40 minutes in. God damn it. Sorry, folks. Those that wanted to get into the spiritual and the weird stuff. Sorry it's taken so long. But we're going to do it. I promise you. I'll get into it. You have to install like software for all of them to be able to do that. Like Corsair's IQ software, and then you have like Armory Crate from Asus, and Lenovo has their own, Logitech has their own, Microsoft has their own, amazingly. Whoever you start to get into, like, again, it turns into another ecosystem play, just like with smartphones. Okay. In fact, that very quickly, that brings up another comment that, part of arguing for getting a Copilot Plus PC, the amazing thing I've come to realize, and this really is amazing, is there's not much that a Copilot Plus Windows PC can't do that like the Pixel, like say that the Pixel 9, okay, if you're getting a Pixel phone, that the Pixel 9 can do. But what I'm getting at, like a Magic Eraser, like all of these AI features that Google has touted really hard, a Copilot Plus PC can actually do pretty much all of them. And I'll admit it's kind of cool, like, because part of the reason I got a Pixel 9 was I wanted to take advantage of, for media creation, because it's what I do. I wanted to take advantage of a lot of the AI features, but like now, as of April 2025, Windows can do most of it natively, even locally. It's pretty impressive. So, maybe you don't need the fancy Pixel phone. Okay. So, maybe put the money into the desktop. It depends on your workflow. How much time do you spend on a laptop compared to a phone, blah, blah, blah. Of course, in a dream world, we'd spend time on neither. Wait, did I say that out loud? Sorry. Okay. But once again, and here we are, Princes of the Universe. Okay. So yeah, thinking about hardware, like what hardware you buy, for this, and like, basically like what manufacturer do you get the computer from? Okay. If you're not doing your own desktop build. I have been a fan of Asus for a very long time. Okay. I think as far as gaming goes, it's basically like Razer, Lenovo, Asus, as far as gaming goes. Okay. I've seen HP, do some really cool shit, for sure. And Acer, of course, they can do fine. They're on the lower end. There's questions about longevity of what they build. And there's some other, like Omen, there's like boutique Cyberpower. There's boutique companies out there as well. Gigabit, whatever, or Gigabyte, right? Is that it? Yeah. But I've basically, I've almost always stuck with Asus. When you get on Asus's lower end, things start to fall apart quickly. But if you stay in Asus's higher end, like their Tough series and their ROG series, you're going to do very well for yourself. That's just as true for Lenovo, right? As long as you stay within like ThinkPad, even their Lock, LOQ is kind of their version of Tough, and their Legion series, like you're going to do very well for yourself. Razer is Razer. Nothing else need be said. Dell, I don't know. Dell looks like they're starting to invest more in AMD in 2025. That seems to be true for a lot of people, including MSI, who I've been a fan of in the past. But by and large, MSI and Dell have been really hardcore on Intel. Again, that seems to be changing finally, since everybody else knows that Intel's a fucking dumpster fire. Okay. But so to my mind, unless you're wanting to go super, and you're going to pay the Razer tax if you go with Razer, unless you want to go that route, like stick within Lenovo. And honestly, I think bang for your buck, you get a lot more with ASUS. Okay. And you can get rid of Armory Crate if you don't like that. You know, like you can, there's open source options for Armory Crate. It was like G Assist or whatever. So, you know, consider that. I have the 2024 A16 Plus. That's what I use. I think it's incredible. Like, it is an awesome machine that I have a hard time putting down. It's so damn good. So, you know, like that's the route that I went, and it has the 4070 in it. Do not get, and this is something also I learned when I was researching for this question, do not get an ASUS A16 2025. Do not get the TUF A16 2025. They actually downgraded its AI capabilities, and they put a Ryzen 200 series in it. They will let you upgrade the RAM now, great, but they got rid of a lot of the nicer features, and I also find that to be incredibly strange. So, but again, if you type in Copilot Plus gaming PC, like, and then you start requiring USB 4 and, you know, all this stuff, like, it's going to narrow down the list to, like I say, at most, like 4 different laptops that you're going to look at. Okay. I went with ASUS. You may want to go with something else. And that's, you know, that's my recommendation overall in a broader perspective. Yeah. So there we go. Let's get into the, oh wait, you also said, what about headphones? Oh boy. I could go another hour talking about headphones. I mean, look, most of the time I use a pair of Apple earpods, not AirPods, earpods that plug in, you know, that are wired. I know, how ancient. Okay. And I do fine with those. I game with those. I do everything with them. Like in podcasting, editing, all of it, I do everything with them. I have nicer headphones, but I always pull out, you know, the earpods, not the AirPods, the earpods. I don't know if that's going to work for you. You know, like I said, when you're getting into an ecosystem play, like, and you don't want to install a bunch of weird ass software, you may want to stick with, you know, like if you do get an ASUS laptop, you may want to stick with ASUS made headphones, which they have great ones, or they have very good ones anyway. They also have very good, you know, mice and all of that. But that's your call if you want to stick within that ecosystem. Obviously Bose has the best active noise cancellation just by patents alone. You know, like no one's going to beat them. Not really. Okay. You know, Corsair has headphones that offer Dolby Atmos, Dolby Atmos is that's another kludgy subject that I don't want to spend a ton of time on. But you know, Corsair has, you know, really, really killer headphones, especially as far as Bluetooth goes. But again, by and large, you know, I stick to my earpods. And one of my solutions around that is I'll buy one of these little like Bluetooth receivers that'll have like the latest Bluetooth spec, like Bluetooth 5.4. Okay. Because Bluetooth security is absolutely essential. So you want to, if you're not going to do wired and you need wireless, like you want the latest Bluetooth spec as much as possible. This is another thing that all those review sites you go to, they don't pay any attention to that. So you can get these little, like, they're like 20, you know, anywhere between 15 to 30 bucks. You can get these little Bluetooth receivers that are usually like made for cars, but they're tiny. They're very small. And they have all their functionalities, you know, all their buttons and everything, you know, built right onto the little box. And you can they'll have a 1/8 jack on them. And you can plug in, you know, a pair of headphones like earpods that have the 1/8 jack, and it converts them into being wireless headphones right? Now you still have the wire, but you can walk away from whatever device you have them connected to. And oftentimes these things will have so many neat little like features built into them where, they can connect to like 4 or 5 different devices at the same time. Like the one I have right now is from Ugreen. And not that I'm into like plastic or electronics waste, but if it goes bad, it's not like you have to throw away all your headphones, right? Because actually, though admittedly, that little box costs more than the earpods themselves. But this is my point, is that like you could get really old school, high-end Sony headphones, right? That are still like the studio standard, that are wired. And you could make them wireless with this little device. And that's the way I like to go, because it also allows them to, like one of the things I hate with like usually the earphones is the ability to switch between devices. If we're not talking about Apple's ecosystem, the ability to switch between devices is often like you have to go into the software and then disconnect them. And then you can go into the software on the other device that they weren't connected to and then connect them there. And it just becomes a complete pain in the ass when the whole point of Bluetooth headphones is to be easy. Usually these little boxes will have a dedicated button that will let you do that. So I'm a big fan of just doing that, of getting wired headphones, but then just getting a Bluetooth receiver for them that makes them wireless, or less wire, or more wireless, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's the route I go. You don't have to go that way. You might have completely different opinions on that. I think Dolby Atmos is an impressive technology. I've talked about that in the past on my show. So, if you want to do that, like, yeah, maybe take a look at the Corsairs. I think they had a new model come out recently, like the Corsair Max, or the Virtuoso Max, I think it's called. Those are ones to look at. I mean, it gets into all kinds of things. Turtle Beach even has great ones, whatever. So that's a bit of a different story. Hopefully I helped answer that. But a lot of those big headsets, I don't know if you'd want those to be connecting to like your smartphone and everything. Maybe you do. In those cases, that's where I really like having, the very pocketable, Apple EarPods. So, or again, look at something with Bose. I also do not like having my, hearing wiped out. Like I like being able to hear my surroundings. So that's another reason I don't like things that jam into my ears. I like ones that sit on the ear, or can sit over the ear, is a little bit better, but I really like the ones that are just a little bit, sitting on the ear, not in, just like on it. Anyway, so there you go. Okay. Now I said that I would get into this other one. And so since we're almost at an hour, for the sake of brevity, I am going to, let me truncate this because the bulk, or the kind of the meat of it, is more in the middle of the email here. Some of this stuff gets personal anyway. Okay. I looked pretty deep, but I haven't seen a single thing in Kabbalah or Judaism about health and more to your flavor, bodybuilding. Yes, there's kashrut law, but nothing so much about physical fitness. What are some of the reasons or justifications within Jewish Kabbalah for taking care of your physical body and being physically fit? Just curious about that connection, my Lord Priest. That's different. All right. Well, I don't know if you're picking up on anything with that, and not claiming to be a priest. Well, I don't have to claim it, others would, but no, I need a priest. Maybe Jewish priest. Anyway, okay. So let's talk about this, because you're right. Are you going to find this anywhere? Probably not. More particularly, I should say, are you going to find this maybe so much like on the internet, or in books maybe that are actually translated into English? I mean, keep this in mind. Like, as far as books that were written for, Judaism / Kabbalah, probably, I mean, I'd be amazed if we even have 20% translated into English. That's how much is missing out there. Now, the beautiful thing is that we do have AI now that we can all use to translate this stuff, at least with some efficacy. It's not going to necessarily carry the important context that some people might want to add on to it when they're doing a more direct translation, like when Daniel C. Matt, did the Zohar. among other things. So, that it's always it's a very mixed bag. We'll put it that way. Okay. But keep that in mind, that like, if you're not finding it, there's the chance that the problem is actually the language barrier, right? Okay. That said, believe it or not, okay, the Tanakh, okay, which is where, most people start when they're looking into Kabbalah, or maybe they start with the Zohar, but what is the Zohar commenting on and referencing at points, right? Okay. Believe it or not, and I know you brought up kashrut law, good on you. Okay. That is because that is in Leviticus, right? That's a huge part of, of the health code within Judaism. Okay. And of course there's like the things like, oh, don't get tattoos, don't do this, don't do that. Make sure, we could talk about, I'm not even going to get into, here's the thing. Because I've talked about this stuff so many times. I'm not going to get into the quote unquote advanced medical knowledge that, seems to get expressed in Torah, in the Pentateuch, particularly, right? The first 5 books, about like, oh, you need to run anything, all of your bounty that is metal, you should put it through fire first, like all these kinds of ideas. Like, I'm not even going to necessarily get into all of that, because you were very clear, or I think you were pretty clear. You were saying, and more to your flavor, bodybuilding, okay, about health. So I think you're talking more about like personal health. Yeah, you're not exactly going to find that. Like, you're not going to find a verse in Torah or like maybe particularly in the Talmud and elsewhere, where it's saying like, oh yeah, do 20 push-ups, make sure you can lift 250 pounds, things like this. Like, that's not going to come up. And you're not wrong in that you're not finding that anywhere. Okay. It's not like, well, for example, I mean, even though it's kind of an offhand comment, but like, in another occult school, which I think Kabbalah is part of the occult, okay, or would be listed under that, even though it's so much more. Okay. It's not like with Golden Dawn, where, like if you read the self-initiation into the Golden Dawn, like it's going to tell you that a magician should be very physically fit, should regularly exercise. Like, it says that point blank. Okay. And that's part of the attraction to Golden Dawn, because Golden Dawn like integrates, Jewish mysticism, it integrates Kabbalah, but also it is very matter of fact. Like, it doesn't really pull a lot of punches. Some of its texts maybe, but like the works of, some of the more common works, by Regardi and others they get very much to the point. Okay. You need to do XYZ over 3 months, and then this over 6 months, and then blah, and that makes it very attractive because it's very structured, right? I mean, reality itself though is not so well structured. It is, but at the same time, it's not. That's the paradox. But remember, whenever we get to a paradox, we want to hold it and recognize that we must be getting close to some great truth. Okay. So you are not going to get, like you would in Golden Dawn, you are not going to get a straight shoot. You are not going to get a straight statement of this is how you should be. Okay. Like, this is the health practices. You should be in the gym. You should be doing blah, blah, blah. Okay. Like, you're not going to find that. However, you are going to basically find, if these, ways of living are important, okay, like being healthy, and whatever else. Okay. If these are important aspects of what you're talking about, you're going, if this is like bread, right? This is the bread you're looking for. The bread crumbs are sprinkled around for you to find it. Okay. And the bread crumbs in this case, as far as, okay, so let's talk. You said, my Lord Priest. Let's talk about, okay, like, what is the Kabbalist? What is like the goal here? What does that look like? Okay. So depending upon who you read within Kabbalah, including who's available in English, right? So you have like, you have Lurianic Kabbalah, which is probably the most popular system and what was more or less adopted by Hasidism. Okay. Even though the Baal Shem Tov is on a whole other level there. Okay. But you have like the Kabbalah of Moses Cordovero, which, pre-existed Isaac Luria's work. Okay. And Cordovero is very adamant that everybody should be practicing Kabbalah. And he also didn't just mean Jews. Okay, now, the trouble you run into is that when you start reading the Zohar very early on in the multiple texts of the Zohar, you're going to find out this like, oh, this knowledge isn't for this person or this person or this person. I mean, you've got to understand this, that the Zohar, whenever they're talking about witches and everything else, and I've talked about this before, but whenever they're talking about that, they're really only talking about Christians. Okay. And if you wanted to put a finer point on it, they might also really only be talking about Catholics. So keep that in mind. Okay. There's such a huge subject to get into with that. That is stuff that I have not talked about before. But man, anyway, I won't get lost on that. Okay. So Kabbalah is this Jewish mystical system that, while it wouldn't be called Kabbalah until the Common Era, before that, it would be like, Merkabah, mysticism, and we might have other names that haven't been uttered in a few thousand years and whatever that it would make up. Okay. Or that would be this tradition. The bottom line is that there is a lineage, if we were to call it that, there's a lineage of knowledge that gets passed down orally. Okay. This is part of like the concept of the oral Torah that we have evidence of. We know that it wasn't written down even in the Mishnah, okay, that gets passed down by the sages. Now, another word for, say, the sages, okay, would be, at some point, would have been the priesthood. So you basically had as I used to call many, many, many years ago, when I was on shows with other people and whatever else, that I would say would be the Judaism within Judaism. Okay, so you have this other priesthood. Now we know that there are multiple types of priesthoods, right? Because you have the Sadducees versus the Pharisees and all this. So like none of this is controversial yet. But you do have within Kabbalah, basically the people passing this thing down would have been what would effectively be an ancient priesthood. And now, again, get to the 13th, 14th century, and you got guys like Cordovero saying, not or even before that with Abraham Abulafia, no, everybody needs to practice this. This is for everybody. Everybody's going to become the Messiah, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, and they're not wrong about that. Like that's great. Okay. But you do have some things that, again, I said earlier how, 80% of, Jewish texts have never been translated into English. Well, there's an incalculable amount of knowledge, really, that has never been written in any language, ever, and has just been passed down. Okay. Now, how do you keep track of that kind of knowledge that is just like orally transmitted that never gets passed down? How you do that is through what you could kind of call like a mnemonic. Okay, not Johnny. In the sense that you have texts that you preserve that have, like I said earlier, the breadcrumbs that lead you to the bread. If the unspeakable or the unwritable knowledge is the bread, you have breadcrumbs that lead you to that point to it, that remind you of, and jog your memory of, okay, this is what we were saying. And this is, none of this is really controversial, because this is basically, in Judaism proper, it's often said that there are multiple ways that you read the Tanakh, that you read Torah, okay, especially Torah, in that, there's the surface level, and then there's like kind of like, what does this mean on a mystical level? Like there's multiple levels in which you read these texts, and that's really important to understand. Now, the funny thing is that at some point the surface level kind of becomes meaningless, right? And not only that, but as I've told you many times, the sages in Judaism made it abundantly clear 2,000 years ago that that one of the greatest sins you can commit is to understand the Torah literally, is to treat it as a literal document. Now, was that just rabbis wanting to piss on the Karaite? Maybe. Okay. But this is my point, is that, even within the lineage, You do not. It's a fucking sin to translate these things literally. All of these things have a mystical understanding, and that is their true understanding. Okay? Got that? All right. So, now you might say, well, but I'm not a Jew. What the hell does this mean to me? I just told you. Okay? It really can be something that is more universally applicable. There may always be groups, specific groups, that hold on to certain aspects, okay, and that have different missions for themselves within, this concept of Kabbalah and this purpose within Kabbalah, which is, tikkun olam, right? Repairing the universe, making the universe more beautiful, more life-giving. Not that it isn't already beautiful and life-giving. It most certainly is. Walk outside that door, and as long as you're not living in New York City or Morocco, excuse me, it's a beautiful world, right? So, but it can be more so, and it can be more life-affirming, and it can be more free, and it can, and again, it can just be more beautiful. So if that's the goal, again, you have different orders, shall we say? I don't like that word, but we have different orders within that, maybe different priesthoods, whatever, that, have different missions for themselves and how they are going to bring that to be. If they choose to accept it, right? Very mission impossible. Or, that they feel whatever, okay, that they want to carry on. Now, I mean, there's also the concept within Judaism of the, the Zadik Nephirim, like the 36 people that, without them, basically the universe would completely fall apart. I mean, if you've never heard a concept within Judaism that basically said that, no, humans have to exist. Humans are actually the co-creative creatures. Humans are gods. I don't know what else to tell you, but the Zadik Nephirim are definitely, part of that. But those people have their own, kind of purpose. Now, okay, wait a minute. Are you saying that there's destiny and all this stuff? No. It's way more complex than that. These concepts of, is there fate or is there not fate? Like I always tell you, there's always a third way, and there's something in between that, in between fate and no fate. That's a separate conversation to get into. Okay. But point being is that there are people who, Kabbalah would recognize as having a, they have real bearing on, how the universe operates and so on. Okay. So now this could also be representative in its own way, of, of these different groups, these different secret orders, that have their own understandings, and their own information that is maybe unique to them, that they go out there with. Okay. And this doesn't just mean within Judaism. This could be, people within Islam, or, other traditions, other lineages, other faiths. Okay. Where they have a part of this that they enact to, to their own pleasure as co-creators. Now, within Kabbalah specifically, okay, and again, there's so many Kabbalahs. I mean, that's kind of the point I'm making here. There's so many Kabbalahs, all right? But within a certain interpretation that is held by a lot more than me, okay, but within a certain interpretation, of Kabbalah and a certain oral tradition that I also hold, okay, there are ways to understand that which is Torah, Talmud, Zohar, and so on. Okay. And, again, you can, I like to think that some of this can be very universalist. Okay. But if you don't feel that way, you don't feel that way. And who cares? Rock your Doritos and do whatever. This is a question being asked of me. And so I'm going to answer it to the best of my knowledge. That's it. No judges. Really. I mean it. Okay. All right. So, is there in Kabbalah, is there this health message, this wellness message? Yes, there is. And when I point it out to you, I think it'll smack you so hard, it'll just be wait, how did I not realize that? At least I think you're going to think that way. And, I'll admit sometimes, part of what I said was synchronous about this was Mrs. Sovereign and I were watching The Most Extreme, the show, that's the title, The Most Extreme. And there was a point in it, they do this often where they use like public domain footage and whatever to, keep production costs down. And sometimes they'll show old movies. And a lot of times I've written these movies down and I'm like, oh, I got to get that one. That looks awesome. Like Battle of the Amazons and whatever else. One of the episodes they showed from Cecil B. DeMille's Samson and Delilah from 1949? Phenomenal film. I know you already got it, didn't you? I said that name and you suddenly went, oh, that's where the health message is. Okay, let's keep going. So we watched that episode and that came up, and this was before I even like really did that Q&A, but then that Q&A happened and then the person asked this very question, and Mrs. Sovereign and we actually recently watched Samson and Delilah because of it. Like this all sort of came together in a very weird way. And what was really interesting is, it led me to, like most movies, that are based on some other material, how much fidelity do they have to that material? Now I'm to the point where I never expect any movie or TV show or whatever to have any fidelity to the source material, ever, any. And I'm basically to the point that I'll try and enjoy it on its own merits. Usually movies still suck anyway, even with that mindset. But like, I'm just done with that. Like anybody doing anything in Dune, I have no expectations that they're going to pay any attention to what Frank Herbert said. First off, because the powers that be are never going to let powerful messages like that really get out there. Maybe they did with David Lynch, but that was it. And even that was just much like what we're talking about here. It was breadcrumbs to lead you to the bread that is God Emperor of Dune, right? Okay. So, but when Mrs. Sovereign was asking me, about like, okay, well, what's real, what's not, tell me the story around Samson and everything, like it gave me the opportunity to, and to really see, like, and remember that most people, I mean, Mrs. Sovereign gets this stuff, but I'm just saying most people, like if you go to explain this to them, they're like, wait, that's not what the book says. That's not what's in the movie, or that's not like they don't think about it on the meta level. They don't think about it on the mystical level. Okay. And the story of Samson is, even though it's not technically in the Pentateuch, it's not technically in Torah, right? It's part of the Tanakh. It's part of the book of Judges. Okay. So it's after Joshua. It's like the second book after, or at least depending upon how your listing goes. It's after the events of Moses, not that long after, but after. But the story of Samson, so this comes out of the book of Judges. Okay. Now the book of Judges is really, it's a compilation. It's a bunch of different stories. It's an incredibly valuable book. It's a wonderful book. It's actually a terrifying book at certain points. Okay. Think of like what happens to, the Levite's wife, right? Who ends up getting raped and gets cut into 12 and sent to each of the tribes and all this. And, like the Israelites have a civil war where they almost wipe out the entire tribe of Benjamin, which is ironic considering that modern Jews today are basically comprise 3 of the 12, or technically 13 tribes, right? Modern Jews today are, somebody who's a Jew is either the tribe of Benjamin, the tribe of Judah, which is where the term Jew comes from, or they're Levites. Okay. And even within Levites, there's separate groups. And anyway, point being is that, like the tribe of Issachar and all, like they're gone. Tribe of Dan, which that's actually what Samson was. He was a Danite. The tribe of Dan, like they're all gone, depending upon how you interpret that, but they're not in the Jewish picture right now. How about that? Okay. But the Benjamites, the tribe of Benjamin is, sorry, it sounded like I don't know, something you'd put on bread. Anyway, Benjamite. Is that Vegemite? All right. So, okay. There's parts of the book of Judges that are absolutely disturbing. There's parts within the Samson story that are absolutely disturbing. But what you need to grok is that what's being parlayed in much of the book of Judges, it's not history and it's not about the literal events that happen. It's about, in some ways, it's more about the archetypes, and it's, like I said earlier, it's a mnemonic to remember aspects of that which was orally passed down in the Kabbalistic tradition. Okay? So when you read these like 3 or 4 chapters in the book of Judges about Samson, it's not real. Again, this isn't history against the Philistines and all this other stuff. It's telling you something else. And what it's actually pointing at now, let me stop. Okay. We're going to go 2 hours again, aren't we? I think that's coming. Okay. I'm going to try and be brief on this. The other part that you have to get is, what do they call it? The documentary hypothesis, where basically you have at least 2 to 6 different groups. You know, they'll use the word authors, but when they say authors, they mean author tradition, like author lineage. Like, so really you have like 2 to 6 different ideologies depending upon the day, because they'll say, oh no, this isn't a separate tradition. Oh, that's not a separate tradition. Okay. But you have at least, and I would stick with the 2, okay, especially for the sake of argument, but really overall, you basically have throughout the Tanakh, you have 2 different traditions. Just like when you get to the 1st century CE, okay, the time of Jesus, if you believe in that, you get to where there's actually like at least 3, there's many, many different types of Judaism at the time, but you have 2 main leadership positions in the priesthood, that being the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Okay. Now throughout the Tanakh, you also have basically 2 different traditions constantly editing each other, rewriting each other, and trying to get into this one mix. Now, what does this have to do with, the idea that maybe actually the Septuagint is the original and the Hebrew version is not? I might bring up one little point about that within this, but that's besides the point here. So what you have is, within the story, you have 2 different traditions, or throughout the Tanakh, you have at least 2 different traditions. You have what's called the Deuteronomists, and then you have the priesthood. The priesthood is very much concerned with rituals, okay, and say the temple, things like this. The Deuteronomists are very much concerned with laws, lots and lots of laws. They're concerned with like a lot of the mitzvot and all this other stuff. Okay. As to where the priesthood is primarily concerned with what? The priesthood, and the other people don't have, yes, they matter, but the priesthood needs to do what the priesthood does. Okay. So you can read up about all of this. This is all, modern biblical scholarship. This is not, none as yet, anything I've said isn't really, confrontational. Okay. Or controversial. Might be confrontational, but not, certainly not controversial. Okay. Unless you ask Christians, but then everything's controversial for them. Okay. Now, like I said, these 2 are constantly like redacting and editing after each other. Often, in my opinion, what happens is the Deuteronomists are editing the priesthood originals. That is my interpretation and opinion, not just mine, but take that for what you will. Okay. And so the book of Judges is one of those biblical texts that it's incredibly obvious that it has been heavily edited, redacted, and like things have been changed a lot within it. Okay. Now, like I just said, I would argue that what was the book of Judges, what was this compilation of stories, were priesthood originals that would get affected by the Deuteronomists and get altered by the Deuteronomists. So to get back to it, okay, Samson is, so that's our understanding. Okay. There's a mystical understanding of this, and the text has also been heavily edited by a group that isn't exactly friendly to Jewish mysticism, that being the Deuteronomists. Okay. So what happens here with the story of Samson? In fact, I'm half tempted to go grab my Tanakh right now, and start reading out of it. Because this is the other part, especially, if you watch the movie by Cecil B. DeMille, like I said, it's a kick-ass movie, especially for the 40s. Okay. Hedy Lamarr is owning ass in that thing. And I've seen other renditions of the Samson story, and none of them really go the distance with it. Like, all of them I mean, I get it. It's like 4 chapters and there's not a lot of dialogue, so you have to expand quite a bit. And, some of the expansions can be interesting at times and may even lead to some actual truths that exist between the lines of what's in the book of Judges. Okay. But a lot of them, in fact, I've yet to see a rendition of the Samson story that deals with the circumstances around Samson's birth, around the pregnancy of his mother. I've never seen that. Maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. You know the email address. You can get in the YouTube comments, Spotify comments, wherever you want. Okay. You might prove me wrong, but I've never seen one deal with that. And why? Because it's a really weird story. And it smacks very much of the story of Christ, which I'm sure some people would find to be, either vindicating or problematic, depending upon which side that, they stand on with that. So, because you basically have a angel of the Lord, or a messenger, more accurately, you have this messenger, this being appearing before, who would be Samson's mother. Okay. And tells her, and she's barren, whatever. And Samson's father, his name is Manoah. Yeah. His name's Manoah, like Minoans. Okay. That's it. It's the only Greek thing I'm going to bring up. We'll move on. Okay. They're not able to have a child. Doesn't this sound very much like the story of Abraham, of Isaac? It sounds a lot like it, doesn't it? And so she can't have a child. And so, the messenger says that, well, God is gifting you with one. And here are the instructions for how this child is to be. Okay. And so this leads to where Samson would, be raised as what's called a Nazirite, okay, which the Nazirite oath was that you never cut your hair. Basically, you never shaved. You would not drink wine. There's all these little rules. I mean, like, one of the reasons that Jesus is depicted with long hair all the time is because he was called a Nazarene. Okay, so the assumption is that he was a Nazirite, and so he would not cut his hair. Okay, now this Nazirite stuff, getting involved in, in some of the legalities around all this is where we start to run into some of the redactions. But again, I'm just doing a Q&A here. Okay. This isn't like a big documentary, as much as I would love to do that. All right. I need to make a lot more money in my life to be able to do these kind of documentaries, but I'll try anyway, but we're not doing that here. Okay. So Samson's birth. So this messenger shows up, and Samson's mother goes to tell Manoah, Samson's soon-to-be father, of what happens, or of what the messenger said. And then Manoah freaks out and, runs out and cries out to God, saying, please tell me how my son is to be raised. What is this miracle? Tell me how this is supposed to happen. Does God answer Manoah? No, he doesn't. This is also a very strange part of the story, is that the messenger actually showed up to the woman, not the man. Okay. And this fits in with the priesthood writing, that actually the woman is the one that has the more direct connection to the divine. Okay. So you don't get this in a lot of places, but the book of Judges is one of those where it is there, right? Like, you have the prophetess Deborah, you have the great warrior like Zena, but her name's Jael. These powerful women that keep getting depicted in the book of Judges. And it's trying to tell you something there. Okay. Now, obviously, would rabbis and, some specific, maybe in this case, the Deuteronomists or the Pharisees or whatever, would they be very happy about women getting, treated with so much respect? Would Christians appreciate this? Probably not. Because, Ellen White's not a prophet. Anyway, can't be. It's a woman. But Deborah's right there in front of your face. Oh, well, I guess you just ignore that part, right? So moving right along. So, that's a key thing, in understanding that, because also what happens is, okay, so God doesn't respond to Manoah, but then when Samson's mother is out, tending the field, the messenger shows up to her again and says, go ahead and get your husband and we'll explain things to him. But notice, he's not showing up to the husband. The messenger's not showing up to the husband. It's showing up to, to the wife. And then the wife can go and get the husband, and then the husband can come back. It's like almost like the husband's not so worthy. Anyway, we don't want to read too much into that. So, anyway, the messenger explains everything, basically says like, we need him to take these vows. The mother cannot drink, which it's really only been in the past 30 years, maybe, that the idea that a pregnant mother should not drink is common medical parlance. This is right in the Tanakh from thousands of years ago. So I know that's not the health code you're necessarily looking for, but it's there. Okay. Now, some would say that actually that law of not drinking should only apply to Samson's mother and not to Samson himself. This is where the story can get very convoluted. But point being, okay, so what ends up happening is like Manoah, Samson's father is like, holy shit, I can't believe this is happening. We will make a sacrifice to God. And he lays out whatever, a sacrifice of fruits and whatever else, goat maybe. And the interesting thing that happens is the messenger actually sets the altar that Manoah sets up with the offering. The messenger sets it, and I shouldn't say he, but the messenger sets it on fire, not Manoah. There's an importance to this because it points at what the destiny is of Samson. And to understand it, you have to go back to the initiation, to the initial, creation of the Hebrew priesthood, okay, which started with Aaron, right? Or was bestowed by Moses onto Aaron. It doesn't matter if all this stuff happened in history or not. It's a mnemonic telling you the rules or telling you like, okay, this is what you can do. This is how XYZ should be set up. It's not saying, oh, you have to do this. No, it's saying if you want to, engage in this act, this is XYZ what you do. Okay. Bit of a checklist. But that Samson is actually is representative of a priesthood because of this fact, because what ends up happening, Aaron has at least 4 children, right? The first 2 sons end up getting burned alive, killed by God, quote unquote, by God, because they were haughty and they felt that they were powerful enough. And would they think that? Sure they would. They're being told from birth, you're co-creators, right? You are gods. And you're engaging in this powerful act in the priesthood. So they wanted to, enact their own power, and they lit the sacrifice themselves. When at the tabernacle, it wasn't supposed to be, the priesthood wasn't the ones that lit the fire. It was God that would light the fire. Okay. And they, as the story goes in Torah, Aaron's first 2 sons, the priesthood would get passed down to his next 2 sons, but Aaron's first 2 sons, who never married, by the way, Aaron's first 2 sons were burned alive because they broke that part of the covenant. They set the fire themselves. They were thinking that, they were expressing their own power. Now, regardless of the realities or the interpretations around all of that, okay, that event is pointing at why the messenger set the fire in the book of Judges, and that actually Samson, who would also be, because he's a judge, he's basically like kind of a high priest at the time, okay, or equitable to that. He is part of what would be called the soul type of Cain, which all Levites are the soul type of Cain. Okay. And so he's actually going to finish the mission that Aaron's first 2 sons could not. He is going to be the priesthood personified. And that's where we get into. Okay. So if the Kabbalist is effectively part of some kind of ancient priesthood, just by the nature of practicing Kabbalah, then who is your example of the priesthood? Like who do you look at to be like, okay, this is the fruition of it. You think it's Jesus Christ, you're wrong. Like you're just wrong. Who it actually is in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, is Samson. And so then we have to ask ourselves the question. So what exactly was Samson like? Well, we all know the story of Samson. Even if people who've never read the Bible know a thing or two about a guy named Samson. It is a name that maybe next to Schwarzenegger is the most attributed to the concept of strength and power, like ever. Schwarzenegger might be the only bigger name in history. Even that, I don't want to blaspheme. No, I love blaspheming. So, in a very roundabout, and again, I'm trying to be I have to be somewhat brief with this. There's so much more to unpack in this. Okay. But in a very roundabout way, what we learn is the priesthood was fucking jacked. Fucking jacked. Now, we know this also because when you read about the ark and like the dimensions and the weight and the size of the Ark of the Covenant and all this, okay, to be able to carry that thing and always be 3 days ahead of the rest of the nation of Israel, okay, like you had to be so fucking physically fit to be able to do that. I mean, just read it, yeah, and like you get it instantly. But even if you didn't know that, when you realize that Samson is this representative, is this archetype, okay, you don't even necessarily have to pay so much attention to the story of Samson. There are things to extrapolate from that. But what Samson was meant to be, what he would become at his, shall we say, maybe purest form, okay? The dude can lift gates. The dude can do all kinds of, it's insane, right? Now, what about the hair? Are you supposed to, does God actually give a shit about the length of your hair and things like this? This is where the Deuteronomist actually, I think, steps in and starts to say, yep, see, you shaved, you did just like the Egyptians, or in this case, the Philistines, you shaved. And so, you broke the rules. And so now you don't have God's blessing anymore and you lose your strength, like that aspect of it. Okay. That comes from the redactors. That comes from the Deuteronomists, not the priestly authors. Okay. But the initial aspect of all this and what Samson's going to be, yes, like that is, again, this is a mnemonic for what are parts of the priesthood. And so, look, I'm not saying that you need to be so fucking huge that you can lift gates or do anything like that. I don't care. All right. There are Kabbalists who clearly don't give a rat's goddamn shit about their physical being, about their physical essence, their physical body and all that stuff. Okay. I'm not here to really, I'm not here to lay judgment on all this stuff. But what I am saying to you is that there absolutely is, and that's not tenuous. Like I said, there's so much more I could talk about with this. Okay. There actually is precedent within Judaism's own rules on how to interpret the Tanakh. Okay. And there is precedent within it. And part of it comes through oral tradition. And again, through mnemonic of what the priesthood is supposed to look like. And basically, is the Kabbalist, might they be into bodybuilding? If you take Samson that literally, yeah. Is that why I do it? No. Okay. The very first reason that I go into the gym, so many days a week and whatever, does that have anything to do with Kabbalah? Does that have anything to do with, with the Tanakh? None. Zero. Okay. You gotta, so if you think I'm out here telling people, oh, everybody's got to get in the gym or they're not holy, fuck you. Fuck anybody that says that kind of shit. Okay. But what I'm telling you is that yes, in practicing Kabbalah, health, wellness, extreme fitness is, at least for, depending upon one's lineage, tradition, oral or otherwise, is a part of the program. Yes. So I love your question. It's incredibly synchronous that you even asked it. But there you go. Now, maybe you'll ask me, yeah, but Samson didn't follow his own rules. Samson didn't do this or that. No, actually, Samson was following the rules, especially for this particular ancient priesthood. He was doing a lot of the right things, not in killing people. That's a whole separate other thing. That's where you get into the Deuteronomists who are oh, if you do this, you need to get stoned. And if you do this, and I don't mean marijuana, if you do this, you need to die and get, sent off for 30 days and whatever else like that. Again, you it's so important to understand. And the critical as in, like the critical text, like the context and the critical eye of the texts themselves, of the Tanakh, clearly show two different strains of thought that are constantly competing with each other. Now, by no means is the Bible the only book that has this kind of, like contextual critique and evidence. Okay. But it's one where, it's pretty damn clear. Okay. I mean, for fuck's sake, you even have two origin stories. So, that's an important thing to understand. I mean, and part of this priesthood, like the idea of Samson saying that, there's no one in Israel that is, he's basically saying that, like, there's no woman in Israel for me. And that's why he goes and marries a Philistine. That is part of this priesthood's lineage to do so. It's a big part of it. And actually, and before you say, well, you're just pulling that out, with Samson. Oh, no. Actually, like I told you earlier, Aaron's first two sons, they did not marry they never married. And they expressly stated there was no woman in Israel for me, just like Samson was suggesting. So it's another one of those, it's another piece of that connective tissue. Okay. Now, I mean, what's the reasoning for that? That's a whole separate subject. You'd have to get into, some of the, like, basically rituals and festivals, holidays of this particular Kabbalistic priesthood. Okay. To really understand, what all of that is about, but it's strewn throughout the book of Judges. Like that is, Rabbi Akiva brilliantly said that the only, basically all of Torah is holy, but the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, is most holy. Okay. Now I get it, what he's saying in that, and I don't disagree, from the perspective that I come from. I don't disagree with him. Holiness is a whole other can of worms, but the idea that all of Kabbalistic truth is inside the Song of Songs, 100%. But if there were a book that I would rank maybe after the Song of Songs, believe it or not, it'd actually be the book of Judges. And it's not just because I think the book of Judges actually argues for decentralization and anarchism. It does, but that's besides the point. So there's so much to unpack from that book. It is a powerful compilation. Again, it's not just one book. It's really a compilation, which is maybe why Akiva didn't give it as much high regard, perhaps. But there's just tons of Kabbalistic truth to extrapolate from that book. And it gets widely ignored by most Kabbalists. Even the Zohar, I don't feel like spends a whole lot of time with it, but, and maybe there's a reason for that, because the Zohar, effectively became a public document, and maybe, they didn't want to reveal the hand. Maybe I shouldn't be revealing the hand, but I am. So there's your evidence within Kabbalah. Samson is the archetype. Now, what about Delilah? Was Delilah the bad gal? Was she the villainess in all this? Actually not. She is representative of another part of the puzzle. Okay. Of, what perhaps this, what we could say this Kabbalistic lineage was about. It's part of the dichotomy of strength and desire. Two incredibly important concepts, the physical and desire. Like two just incredibly important concepts. I mean, another thing that leads to, and I'll just leave with this, because if you're going to go read the book of Judges, what does it start in Judges 13, I think, where it starts talking about Samson. If you're going to read that story, it's not a long story. Okay. Another thing that points at, like, oh, there's a mystical interpretation here. There's things going on. There's 4D chess going on here that I don't know, is the rampant use of numbers within it. Like the 1,100 pieces of silver that Jezebel, that Delilah gets paid for turning over Samson. And boy, doesn't that sound awfully familiar, right? How many pieces of silver did Judas get? Interesting. Very, very interesting. But then, there's the inverted aspect of all this, because like, you say, well, Jesus was the Prince of Peace. Would anybody say that about Samson? I don't know. But is violence part of the program? I wonder. Big stuff to ask. But my point is that, to recognize that there's some kind of mystical interpretation to be had. When you see a bunch of like random numbers just getting tossed out there, like, oh, and he ruled for 20 years and, and then there's this and 100 foxes and, whatever, like that's telling you there's something more there. Those are all mnemonics. Those are all things to point at a deeper meaning within that text. Okay. So to once again answer your question, what are the reasons or justifications within Jewish Kabbalah for taking care of your physical body and being physically fit? There it is. The culmination, the resolution for the quote unquote sin of Aaron's first two sons was culminated in the existence of Samson himself. Not necessarily his whole story, though that's part of it, but in what Samson was. Okay. And did that messenger inseminate Samson's mama? Those are the big questions. But the point being is that Samson is the evidence itself. Samson is the justification within Kabbalah. So I am going to wrap this one up with that. Maybe I'll see some of you at the gym. I don't know. It's okay if you don't. And I mean that. It's fucking okay. All right. There's nothing. The most powerful thing that you can be as a being is yourself. Is authentic. That's power. Okay? Okay. I hope I made that fucking clear. All right. I love you guys, gals, Z's. I mean it. And I'll see all of you, on the other side.